Welcome back. You're watching Arise America. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has held warming ties with China after meeting President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit in Beijing. Modi described bilateral relations as moving in a positive direction, citing renewed border agreements, the restart of the Kailash Mansarovar pilgrimage and the resumption of direct flights as signs of growing cooperation. Modi emphasized the stakes of partnership, noting that the interests of 2.8 billion people in both nations are tied to their cooperation. He adds that strengthened India-China ties could pave the way for the welfare of the entire humanity, underlining a commitment to mutual trust, dignity, and sensitivity in advancing diplomatic and economic relations.
Last year in Kazan, we had very fruitful discussions which gave a positive direction to our relations. After the disengagement on the border, an atmosphere of peace and stability has been created. Special representatives from both sides have agreed upon border management. The Kailash Mansarovar pilgrimage has started again. Direct flights between the two countries are also resuming. The interests of 2.8 billion people of both countries are linked to our cooperation. This will also pave the way for the welfare of the entire humanity. We are committed to take forward our ties on the basis of mutual trust, dignity, and sensitivity.
Now let's chat briefly to Dr. Carrie Odermann. She is a global political expert. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit is our focus now on how it relates to shifting world politics and the US's hold as a world superpower. Good to have you this weekend, Dr. Carrie.
Thank you for having me.
Now, could you help us just outline the history between the two countries, China and India, and the significance of this summit?
Well, there's been tension between these two countries for quite some time. And I think what's most important about this meeting is that it is about everything but just this meeting. It's representing different things to both India, China, and Russia. In the intro, you had discussed the tensions just last year between India and China at the border, but you also need to note that words like management, stability, and mutual respect keep coming up. And this meeting is also about both of these countries and Russia's relations right now with the United States, and not only about their relations with each other.
Now, what do you think is Xi Jinping's goal for this summit? The only thing that comes to mind here for me is to create an alternative on the world business stage due to the recent tariff hikes by the U.S. But let us hear, what you think, why Xi has, come up with this summit and what the purpose is.
Well, I mean, this summit's been happening since 1996, and it started out as the Shanghai Five, and it was an opportunity for China to try to leverage more influence into post-Soviet satellite states. This summit has always been problematic for Russia because China has been exerting influence in the region over states that Russia and the Soviet Union had a lot of control over. This is going to be a counterbalance to Western organizations. But the most difficult thing about this is if you look at something like the G7, there are common denominators. You have agreements on economic forms, democracy, and human rights. And this core group from the Shanghai Cooperation Organization of 10 countries don't have a lot of common denominators. 9 of the 10 are not democracies. They have different priorities. So the one thing they do have in common is that they want to lessen what they consider to be Western meddling in their region. And that's really showing this shift to multipolarity and regional control, regional spheres of influence that's happening in international relations right now.
Now we're going to come to the issue of, 9 out of the numbers you just ruled out with regards, democracy and authoritarian, government. But then talk to us about India in particular as it aligns itself with China just days after a 50% tariff hike.
The interesting thing about this is India's more upset with the United States than they are with China right now. And this gravitation towards China, there has been a warming of relations in the past years. The tariffs that US President Trump has put over India, 50% because of its gas imports from Russia, seem unfair. And this is an example in India of its very flexible foreign policy, where it's not aligning itself with certain blocs. And this is what their strategic autonomy is, what they call this. And being a democracy, India does not initially have a lot in common with the 9 other countries. However, we have to remember that although Prime Minister Modi was reelected, he was not reelected in the landslide that he expected. It was expected that he went over 400 seats, and it was only 240. And this was attributed to many things, but one of the things that it was attributed to was a growing Hindu nationalism that his party, the BJP, seemed to be pushing. And there are some parallels with the ideas of sovereignty that both Russia and China promote. And this idea has carried over into the Shanghai Cooperation Organization about sovereignty, not necessarily meaning just territorial sovereignty and respect for international law, but also that the members of this group believe that sovereignty also means that there should be no external meddling in issues like human rights or anything that is considered state business.
Now, also, Dr. Curry, help us understand this. Now, from your explanation earlier, it's really clear. The biggest buyer of Russian oil is China. As for Russian gas, that's the EU. Russian fertilizer is Brazil. Russian uranium is the US and China. But the highest level of tariff by Trump on India, it's unfair. Can you make sense of it?
I can't make sense of it. And historians have been searching for a historical basis for this. And destroying relations with a trusted ally like the United States has with India, and I do believe that trust has been destroyed, is something unprecedented. In an area where people are moving towards a multipolar world, to not have strong alliances and be trying to go it alone doesn't make much sense. Some experts think that Trump thought he could leverage these tariffs against India because he saw India as weaker than China or Russia, and India's interest in the US market might have been miscalculated, but it might have been an attempt to get India to do what he wants, and Trump would then have been performing for his party base.
Now, just how significant is Russia's role here, especially in the SCO summit?
Oh, it's extremely significant. But again, it's less to do with the summit and more to do with grandstanding. Vladimir Putin has had the red carpet rolled out for him several times in the last few weeks. And it's as though after the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, that he's back on the international stage and he's no longer isolated. This meeting also took place in 2022, and then Xi and Modi were with Putin in this platform. So this is also a way of showing solidarity or support or some type of loose grouping, even though the common denominator is really hard to find among this group. Putin is going to be doing a lot for his domestic audience, and he'll be spending 4 days in China, and he's already emphasized that Chinese-Russian relations are at an all-time high. Chinese national television, CCTV, actually called the relations with the Kremlin right now the most stable and I believe most mature and strategically significant among all countries in the world right now. These summits are used to really divert from domestic challenges, but also to legitimize what's happening in Russia. And this ties back to the authoritarian governments that are part of this meeting. 90% of them are authoritarian governments. It's a reflection of being in a group where the domestic audience in Russia sees that and thinks it's normal.
Now, right. Now, the thing is, Vladimir Putin is attending the summit. We already know that. The last time we had a Putin appearance, just like you said, with the world leader was Trump about less than 2 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago. Trump was, positive about a meeting between Ukraine and Russia. Where does that peace agreement stand now after the Trump-Putin meeting? And, Zelensky has said that Putin is making the meeting very difficult.
I pointed out in a past discussion with you that Putin seems to be able to travel, and his claim that there's difficulty to organize a meeting is stalling. This meeting is relevant in the sense, though, that if this regional bloc can be created and China and Russia can exercise influence over this group of 10, and it's a total of 20 countries, including the observers that are there right now, this might have consequences not only for Ukraine, but also Taiwan and Tibet and any area where there are border disputes in this region because of this idea of how sovereignty is defined by these big powerhouses involved in the Shanghai meeting. It's both China and Russia see some of the land that they've invaded as a domestic issue, which would then fall into the sovereignty issue, not meddling in states' issues, which if they can bolster diplomatic support from the region from meetings like this, it could have really negative effects on international law and sovereignty.
So let's look at the issue you raised earlier today, which is the history of the SCO, made up of members with 9 over 10 being authoritarian governments, with only India being classified as a party-free democratic country. How does the lack of liberal Democrats within the, Shanghai Cooperation Organization affect Cooperation Plus? I want you to answer that with how these decisions they're about to make at the summit affect global tensions, regional stability, and the future of international institutions.
Well, it's not a good sign that there's a growing amount of authoritarian governments around the world. And I think for the first time in 2025, people living under authoritarian governments are outnumbered by those living in democracies. Does this mean democracy is no longer relevant? No. What's interesting, though, is actually just thinking about how the summit or this organization, what would come out of a meeting where its members are not democratic. However, they're making decisions based on a democratic format according to their charter, and which is somehow an acknowledgement that there does need to be some type of rule-based system, which they simply do not apply at home. So what usually comes out of these meetings? It's joint declarations, it's strategic documents, and what you're going to hear more of since this meeting, if you haven't already, is a term, the Asian century. And that's an idea that the 21st century is going to be dominated politically and economically by Asia, and that means China and India. And that's going to be a period of rapid growth and a lot of influence. And it's a concept which kind of ties to the 20th century, which was considered the American century, just like the 19th century was considered the British century. So this influence, this power, and this growth coming out of this region is what they want to promote. And is it a self-fulfilling prophecy? I mean, this group makes up 40% of the world's population and has 30% of the world's wealth. So there is a little bit of a catch-up to be done there, but they're still doing well.
Another leader attending this meeting, I think on Wednesday, is Kim Jong-un. Tell us how significant the North Korean leader is to this meeting. I mean, having these world leaders or world powers gather together, the role of Kim Jong-un, we literally barely talk about him. How significant is his attendance to the summit?
Well, you're one up on me here. I wasn't realize he was attending this. And we don't talk about him very often because he's not invited to a lot of places. He's not really considered a legitimized leader. And much like Vladimir Putin was treated by the West after the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, this isolation is a way of using the norms of a rule-based order to express that. His being there is almost, well, it's not almost, it's bringing him back into the fold of nations' leaders and legitimizing his form of government and how he treats his people.
Right. A lot of things you've talked about here has been legitimizing, some of the issues that the world will look at as something that shouldn't be. But thank you so much, Dr. Kari.